could you just kind of explain all of the different roles you personally have here at Elon University?
Yeah, I currently have 3 roles at Elon. So my primary role is that I'm an assistant professor of political science. So first and foremost, I'm a political science professor. My secondary role is director of the Elon University Poll. And then I have a temporary position that's a term position as faculty fellow for civic engagement. The faculty fellow for civic engagement role is probably the least straightforward of those in terms of understanding what that means. It's largely a position to help facilitate interactions between faculty members and student life, to coordinate the many events we have going around on campus related to civic engagement. Be that be pop-up panels that we do right after breaking news events, or things like submitting university reports at the end of the year to the federal government about what we're doing in terms of community service.
Mm-hmm.
But this is my last year doing that.
For that third role?
Yeah.
You're still sticking with the other 2, though?
Yeah.
Gotcha. And I guess from your experience being here for the last, when did you start again?
2012.
2012. How has Elon's kind of promotion of civic engagement evolved over time? Because it seems that Elon Votes came out in 2014.
Right.
And there's been, I think, a lot more polls coming out, generally speaking, at a greater frequency.
We're doing horse race polls. Before they didn't do horse race polls. Elon Votes emerged in an embryonic form in 2012, in large part because we realized our students aren't just from North Carolina, they're from all over the place, and it's confusing to help them figure out how to register in all 50 states. And so we looked into ways to do that, and we found this program, Turbo Vote, which tried to simplify absentee ballots in every state. So really Elon Votes emerged to try to figure out how do we help students from all 50 states figure out when elections are in their states and how do they get registered in whatever state they may be in.
And so it was that embryonic stage, like you said, in 2012. But
Right.
then with Hagen Tillis, it actually started being an active organization officially.
Yeah, 2014 was really more of a trial run where we tried to figure out, okay, what are students interested in? How do we get students to pay attention to voter registration? Should we put signs at this point in Mosley? Does it work to sending out emails? Should we have tables? So in many ways, 2014 was like a test period where we really just figured out how do we reach students with the message that voting is an essential part of democracy. We don't care how you vote, we just want you to vote.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was Dr. Eves who mentioned to me, yeah, Elon Votes is important. I've stressed the importance of voting, but that's just one of the many different things you can and should be doing. And civic engagement isn't just political involvement, right. It involves so much more. So when you think of being civically engaged, what comes to your mind?
To me, civic engagement is a large part about being an active citizen. It's about being a member of your community. And by member, I don't mean just living there. I mean actually being engaged in a person's community. That means service learning, so doing things like volunteer work in the community or getting involved in community organizations trying to give back. It also means paying attention to the issues that are important in a community. And I don't just mean political issues, but I mean things like public transportation or downtown revitalization or local health care or local food markets. I think it's important for people to know what are people like in their community, especially people who may be different, because we know what we're like ourselves, we're around ourselves all the time. The difficulty for everybody, isn't just students, is getting to know what life is like for people who we may not encounter on a daily basis.
And that's one of the things that Elon consistently pushes. I thought
Right.
I'd have a nickel for every time I heard global mindset or civically engaged, I'd be a millionaire right by now. But one of the questions that I've kind of gathered after kind of looking at different administrators and affiliations of different senior staff members is that we're really not all that diverse internally here on campus. We have primarily Caucasian guys, primarily Democratic or Democrat-leaning.
I have no idea.
Right.
I've never looked.
But how diverse is Elon University internally?
I'm trying to think the best way to answer that. I would say that if you look at a profile of senior staff over the years, you do see it's becoming more diverse. Almost no sort of executive level group in any part of the country is as diverse as the country as a whole, but there's increasing number of women on senior staff as well as minorities. In terms of political diversity, I actually have no idea of the politics of any senior administrator. The discussion has never come up. Been doing these kind of meetings and planning events now for several years. There's never been a single time where a person said, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, this is how I would like to do content because I'm a Democrat or Republican. When things come up, it's about values that are integrated into the university's mission statement. So things like being a responsible citizen and a leader in a global society. That, I think, informs things. I've never seen personal partisanship inform the types of programming that goes on campus.
And one of the things that I have heard is that from Provost House, he sent out an email to, I don't know if it was fac staff, but I believe just deans and above and high-level admins around August or so. And part of that was saying, your faculty, staff, professors, you can speak politically however you want, you can support anyone you want, you can vocalize that however you'd like, as long as it's respectful, obviously.
Right.
But for administrators, there's a different standard where we don't want your view to reflect the university's view. Is that anything that you've noticed or heard about?
I'm not familiar, I'm not high level enough to be on that email chain. I do think people are aware, both faculty and administrators are aware that they are in positions of power and that they don't want students to make up their minds simply because that's the way that they think. I would say as an institution and as faculty, we value critical thinking. That means you should come up with the conclusion on your own through your own independent thought processes, not just by simply parroting somebody who's in an authority position.
Right. But I guess my question would specifically be about free speech kind of, not concerns, but the different standards for certain people versus other people. And as a professor for you, have you felt free and open and no one's ever said it? Say this or say that?
I'm a moderate independent who tries to be as neutral as possible.
Not publicly voter search available in North Carolina either.
And part of that is I don't want people to sort of think that I'm for one candidate or one political party at all, because I'm supposed to be the neutral person out there. Not everybody needs to be that, but if you're a political scientist, you're trying to weigh in on election results one way or another, I think there's a almost moral duty to be neutral on those things. So I do everything to be as publicly and even privately neutral as possible. Every day I sort of go through this sort of mantra in my head, like, okay, let me make an argument on behalf of this Republican policy, let me make an argument on the Democratic side, so that I'm able to really carry water for both sides if need be and understand where they're coming from. So me personally, no, I've never felt like I can't express myself because my position is really to try to be value neutral and just base things upon empirical evidence and facts. If I was a private citizen and not in the kind of role I am, that would be a little bit different.
And as far as public opinion polling goes, there's a lot of polarization politically right now, and I think some of that's kind of reflective in some of the polls that we're seeing run by Democratic agencies and Republican agencies. Why do you feel that as a pollster it's important to be independent? And I know there's going to be special circumstances where candidates want their own type of thing, but why is it important for a pollster to be objective?
I don't think all pollsters need to be objective.
Right.
PPP is a Democratic polling firm, and they produce some good results, and they're not objective in the sense of saying that they're neutral. But I think academic survey researchers in particular need to be. For one, we're not using money from a party. This is money that's supposed to be used for basically as a service to the state to produce accurate and reliable results without one form of bias or another. And much like journalists, some journalists get by taking a political angle, and that's fine. There's a room for that. There's a market for liberal journalists. There's a market for conservative journalists. They provide a valuable service. But if you don't have any sort of middle ground of a neutral journalist, then how do people really know what to trust at the end of the day? So if we got rid of objectivity in every newspaper and every major network in the country, I think the country would be much worse off than it is today.
And everyone has a bias. It's just a matter of being fair and objective in hearing that other perspective.
Yeah, certainly. It's important to know that we all have personal biases, even though I consider myself a raging moderate. I still, I'm sure, have biases. Like, for instance, I still believe fairness is important. I think murder is wrong. That's a bias. I think that there's all sorts of things that are bad out there. I think, genocide is a bad thing. That is a bias. That is a value judgment. But in general, at least for my role, I try to not favor Democrats or favor Republicans one way or another in my personal thinking or in the information I provide.
And I kind of wanted to focus on kind of Elon's role in the political process, and you're probably, arguably, the most prominent person in terms of just how much you do. You
Right.
moderate events, you do the Elon poll, you're on several different work groups, and there's just a lot that you're doing. Why? Why take all of this on?
Series of bad decisions because I already lost my hair and could afford to lose. Wasn't going to lose any more taking all those things on. No, I think that it's very important for universities to remember one of the early reasons why universities ever came about, which was not just to train people in technical fields, but also train people to be good citizens. Now, what does that mean? Nobody really knows, but we do know that having certain skills, so being able to engage in dialogue with your own side as well as the other side, are really critical to make democracy work. This is an old Jeffersonian notion that Thomas Jefferson was supportive of universities because he thought that they were essential for the country as a whole going forward. So I embrace that universities need to not only provide people with the technical skills and know-how to work in the economy, but also the types of basic things that are necessary to engage in the types of dialogues and deliberations that are necessary for democracy to work. So however I can help Elon do that in an effective way, I'm happy to do it. But it is exhausting at times.
And just in terms of efforts to bring people who are political figures onto campus, essentially kind of my gathering of the process is Elon University doesn't recruit people. Elon University has student groups or organizations who suggest to the university who they would like to bring on campus, and the university itself facilitates conversations about logistics, how we're going to do it, where we're going to do it. Is that kind of the general gist of things?
My general impression is that's right. The university updated its guidelines for political activities. Much of that was because they needed just clarification. They were confusing. They were confusing to me when I was trying to read them and figure out, like, okay, so what do you do in this scenario versus that scenario? So much of it was just like moving paragraphs around than anything else.
They had that in like 2006 or so, right?
And there was a policy passed in 2009 or 2008.
And it just hasn't been updated.
And it just hadn't been updated. So basically it was just 8 years, and it hadn't been used that much because we hadn't had many candidate visits. But it became clear, in part after Bill Clinton visited the law school this summer, of like, how do we make this fair for both Republicans and Democrats? Elon's a 501c3 nonprofit, and so it cannot take legally a position on political parties one way or another. Our students, though, can invite groups to campus. We do have a protocol in place essentially to facilitate student groups' invitation of candidates to campus. Much of this is, one, to be fair to all sides, so you can't have just allowing certain groups, or if you have a candidate on campus, you can't say, well, only our group can listen to this candidate. We won't allow anybody who disagrees with us into the room. That's not what universities are about. They're about free exchange of ideas. And furthermore, big candidate events have huge security and logistical concerns. Sometimes it means you got to close down a parking lot or a street, or you've got to have a bunch of security forces. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a procedure in place that if candidates wanted to come to campus and student groups wanted them to come to campus, that we could manage it in a fair way that led to a positive experience for people and not sort of the chaos that can come with candidate visits.
And how would you compare the 2009 one to the 2016 one?
I think it's just clearer for the most part. That's the main thing. These events happen so fast, and you get a phone call and you've got 24 hours to react to them. It's important that everybody involved sort of knows one way or another. There are certain things that were missing in the 2008 or 9 guidelines that are now here. One of those were candidate forums. So if you held a debate, what are the rules for that. And in fact, the IRS has a very clear guideline on here are the rules for doing debates and candidate forums on campus. So that's almost copied and pasted from IRS guidelines.
Gotcha. And as far as do you have any kind of roles or responsibilities between facilitating the dialogue as far as, like, I guess, student groups and administration efforts and to try and host these premium events? Do you have any kind of roles
In terms
or
of candidate
responsibilities in those capacities?
So if a campaign, a lot of times campaigns, particularly high-level campaigns, aren't going to reach out to a student as their point of contact, so they'd call an administrator. Our take so far has been that we should not be the one to invite candidates, but if a candidate does call and ask, we can refer them to the student. So I had a phone call. I don't want to say the name of the candidate because it's private information, but the candidate said I was interested in coming to Elon. So I said, here's the name of the student group that you should reach out to. We've set up a thing through Phoenix Connect where students can easily make this request. That request goes to John Dooley, who then sends it to a number of other people, and then there's a pretty straightforward approval process. The goal is not to keep candidates off the campus. It's just to kind of figure out, okay, we need to make sure our students aren't distracted from going to class and that they're not having a rally inside a classroom, for instance.
And then that person who ended up fulfilling that request came here just like, what, 2 weeks ago?
No, this was another one that hadn't materialized. That's why I don't want to say, because it's...
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And as far as...
Elon Politics Forum has been the primary group
That's-
so far doing these types of things, yeah.
And as far as kind of the gubernatorial, senatorial side, could you just describe
For the debates?
for the debates? 'Cause
I wasn't that involved with that except for very early conversations. Did you talk to get Dan Anderson about that?
Yeah. And essentially kind of what I didn't know if you had a different perspective or like...
Did he just tell you it was just logistical
It was just,
difficulties?
I mean, he perfectly explained
Yeah.
it. I just didn't know if you had
My
like
sense
a-
is that they were just logistical issues and that
Yeah.
our big rooms are booked a lot. So like McCreary Theater is one of our only places big enough to hold a major event, but there are plays and productions and all sorts of things going on there all the time. And so I don't really know what happened, but all I heard was that the candidates couldn't ever pick a date, and so we couldn't accommodate them schedule-wise.
Exactly. And my final one is just making sure I cover everything. I got it. We had David Gergen commencement, and then we were seeing Kathleen Parker. There was the backlash. Elon responded saying we want all diverse perspectives. But it seems that some people still have the concern that we were the fighting Christians, we were this more conservative institution, but now we're leaning more liberal or more democratic. From your time here, have you seen Elon become further to the left or become more liberal?
I haven't seen any.
Thing at all?
Yeah, I haven't seen any changes in terms of the employees of Elon. I don't have a survey of employees, so I don't know where they stand. I could imagine as you see fewer, if you took like a 30-year perspective and you saw fewer students from a conservative region of the country, so North Carolina in the 1980s, fairly conservative region, and then you've replaced those students, or they've not really replaced them, but it's shifted where there's fewer people from conservative areas, more students from liberal areas in the Northeast. That probably changes the student body on that. That said, many of our students are of high socioeconomic status and backgrounds. People of high socioeconomic status tend to vote for Republicans. So I actually don't know what the political composition of the student body is. Might be a really good project for ENN to start developing a student survey.